Good evening and welcome. This is the People's Platform. Our guest tonight has worked extensively on community development and its intersectionality in water, sanitation, hygiene, climate and water security, locally, regionally, as well as internationally. She also leaves no holds barred in calling a spade a spade. Our topic tonight is engaging communities as catalysts in community development. I'm so pleased to welcome award-winning environment and climate change advocate Kusum Athukorala, who also functions as the regional chair of the Global Water Partnership in South Asia. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Sonali. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Lovely to have you. Ms. Athukorala, condensing this conversation to 40 minutes is going to prove very challenging because of the multitude of areas that we have to cover. But before we get into climate change and water security, I'd like to draw your attention to this incident where a few months ago the government wasted time, resources on dictating the attire of female school teachers, as a result of which there was a massive debate on varying aspects. At present, we see the aftermath of an economic crisis that was politically created, where school children have no way of going to school in certain areas of Sri Lanka because they don't have uniforms, they don't have shoes, they don't have books. And parents are unable to send their children to school. So speak to us about the hypocrisy, the issues that Sri Lanka is facing at present.
Yes, Sonali. Actually, working with schools, school sanitation, school wash has been, quite an important part of the work that I do. And I am quite distressed because many of the schools that I work with are the marginalized schools. They are estate sector schools, there are small rural schools. And every one of those schools is having children who are finding it difficult to come to school. I don't want to waste a lot of time about the cost of living and the perma crisis that we seem to be finding ourselves in the education sector. But I would like us to reflect that if there is anything that Sri Lanka has achieved, it is the achievements of health and sanitation. These are global achievements which are which we need to fight to make sure that we retain it for the next generation. I'd like to show this picture where it's one of my favorite pictures taken on the Anuradhapura road, where this woman in a tiny little kade, in a tiny little shop, is sitting and reading a newspaper. That is a gift that many women in South Asia and in Asia or even in the globe just do not have. The power of literacy, the gift of literacy, because when you give a woman the gift of literacy, automatically it comes to the children. But now, if we have a problem where children cannot go to school, where they may be dropping out of school, where they may be drawn into as casual labor in the informal sector, where they could be getting, girls could be married off early because the family simply can't keep them. They will be having underage pregnancies and maybe underweight babies. I think we are looking at a whole series of issues which can come from this one issue. Not being able to send the girls to school, I think it is absolutely priority, and we need to have a situation where we have not a blanket program but targeted assistance to help those who are failing to go to school.
If we talk about this from a macro point of view, some of the initiatives already taken by the government. Sri Lanka's Climate Prosperity Plan was recently launched, outlining the national investment strategy to secure Sri Lanka's future in a climate insecure world. Addressing COP27 in Egypt in November, the president made certain undertakings. We see how varying stakeholders have been set up, established, with tasks. However, there's a stark difference, there's a massive gap between these institutions and the ground realities faced by communities, how important is it to have these communities themselves seated at the decision-making table, because they're the ones who suffer at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think that the organization that I am regional chair of, the Global Water Partnerships, strongly believes in an integrated approach, bringing in all the stakeholders, the institutions, the agencies, the academia, the private sector, very important, and also the communities. Because the water is really became very well recognized at COP27, but water is the critical factor for climate change. I mean, if I look at your programs, I would only, maybe see either floods or droughts, or probably both of it, or wildfires to add to the, the misery. So basically, it is a lot of water or the lack of water.
Right.
So understanding that water is too important to be left to the decision making of one agency or one group, I think it brings us to the point where we can make all these people, the stakeholders, come together, understanding their issues, understanding their problems, also understanding their solutions. I think that, a lot of the solutions that we call for may come from the community itself. So community engagement is very important in this perma-crisis of water.
We tend to speak of literacy. However, environmental literacy among Sri Lankans is a whole other thing. We are not very literate when it comes to the environment. Where can we find these skills, inculcate these skills?
For me, a lot of the work that I have been doing has been what you could probably call water advocacy, that we try and inform groups, especially those who have not had access to that kind of information, through programs. The Country Water Partnership in Sri Lanka, the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, has had a long history of doing publications, small publications, related to some of the themes which we are working on. Now these are themes, books on Sinhala and Tamil about school sanitation.
Right.
Now it is important for us to put out this kind of information, but because this is a small piece of paper, but it gives a lot of information to people who will never think about what are the impacts of school sanitation. What is the impact of having a school which doesn't have a toilet? If I remember right, somebody said that 600 schools in Sri Lanka do not have a toilet at all. I have gone to many schools which either do not have a proper toilet or no toilet at all. I mean, having a dysfunction.
That's mind-boggling.
My program really started when I went to do a climate change program in a school which had 1,000 children, girls and boys, 500, 10 toilets, and only one boy's toilet was usable.
No.
I was looking for a toilet, and that was the only thing that I could find. So, that we spend so much of time, energy, making sure that, we get the 6 A's, the 7 A's, etc. But not having a toilet and not having water during school time can have an extremely detrimental impact on the children. Those problems may come up later on. And most of all, I am extremely concerned in working on that area because of menstrual hygiene management. Imagine the situation where you have a girl child who is menstruating but has no access to a toilet. What do? Quite a lot of the studies that we have done shows that they don't go to school for 4 days. So you are losing out on 4 days of education, which is so important to you.
So what is being done about this?
I think the problem has now been recognized by with the government, but the fact is that we all have to do something to make sure that these schools which are left behind come up to the same level. Now, with these organizations that I have been working with, one solution is to give rainwater harvesting systems. The rainwater harvesting system captures water from the roof. Yeah. We use usually this 5,000 liter plastic shells, so that we usually try and link it to the toilet.
Okay.
This is not drinking water that we provide, but it is water to keep the toilets flushed, the toilets cleaned, and to make sure that, there's an environment where a menstruating girl can come to school knowing that there is something that she can use.
Right.
In menstrual hygiene management is not only a problem for the schools. In very many of the organizations that you go to, I mean even in some of the universities, you may have issues where these toilets, the lack of toilets is a problem for girl students.
Most of your field work revolves around engaging with marginalized communities and rural schools. Speak to us about this.
A lot of the work that I feel has to be done is to work with the people who live in the catchments, because the catchments are our water towers, and those water towers need to be protected. We have to have good stewardship. In the end, it is those people who live there who can best look after the water towers and the catchments. So those schools are very often either estate schools, estate sector schools, or remote rural schools. Now, the kind of information that we are talking about, the programs that we are doing, rarely go to those schools because they are far too far away.
Okay.
And nowadays, I think with the petrol crisis, they are even more far away. So basically, we try to access them. But when I would say that some of my best moments and the most heartwarming moments have been working with the estate sector schools in Uwa, Nuwara, Haputale, because when we come and do a program, they are so interested. I mean, they just soak it up like a sponge.
Right.
As you can see in this picture, they are doing their own homework, and they are giving us the list of works that they can do. And then I also saw that children can become a catalyst, taking this message to the elders. Now, in this other picture, it is the school in Nuwara doing a dance drama about water protection and water conservation at the muster shed. The muster shed is where all the women come with their tea, at the end of the day with the tea bags. So they were taking that opportunity to capture the people who are there and give them the message on the importance of water conservation. So we use art, we use music, where we use marchers, different ways of, I would say non-traditional ways, not the lecture type, not the preaching, but ways in which we can get them also to contribute. It is not a one-way learning. It is a two-way learning, because we learn as much as we give.
When we speak of the practical aspects of climate change adaptability vis-a-vis the communities, how important is it to create linkages between the communities as well as the government agencies, academia, professionals, the corporate sector? How do we do this?
Actually, a really good program to my mind brings together at least 3 of those groups.
Right.
Very often the private sector, which has been supporting us in different ways, in supporting communities, building rainwater harvesting systems for schools, even starting up the menstrual hygiene management programs, I am very pleased to say, was funded by a bank. So, one would say, what does a bank have to do with menstrual hygiene management? Right. But they understood the linkages. The linkages between MHM, sanitation, education, so that entire stream has been understood. It was not easy because, menstrual hygiene management is a bit of a controversial, it's a conservative country. Sometimes you cannot talk very openly about it. I can tell you a very funny story which happened, because the first time when we started the MHM program and we sent letters, and we had people coming and saying, MHM is Arthava Swasthata in Sinhala. So they came and said, we have come for the Arthika Vidya program. And then when we started the program, half the men in the group got up and said, these are women's things, we don't want to be here. So it was difficult for us to get breakthrough, but with the support from good educational zonal officers, I think that is where we could make that breakthrough. You need to have the convincing power to ensure that people buy into your program.
Right.
You need not, you don't go and preach and say, this is what should be done. We have to work with them to talk through a activity, why it is needed, and make them partners. It is only that partnership which will work in the long run.
Climate change and water security are intricately interwoven. There are two upcoming conferences, international conferences, the UN Water Conference coming up in March in New York and the World Water Forum in Bali in 2024. Speak to us about how important it is for the Sri Lankan state to take active measures to not wait until these conferences to come up, but to have a cogent, holistic plan in place to ensure we have a proper water management plan and system.
Yeah, I think that it is, Sri Lanka has always been known traditionally for its wonderful traditional irrigation systems and its hydraulic society. It is very well known. But I am personally very upset because sometimes I feel that we use the words of King Parakrambahu, not a drop of water shall fall to the ground without being made use for mankind, on the 22nd of March, World Water Day, and then we forget it. So I think it is important that this has to happen every day of the year, not only on that one day. We have enough issues, we have enough challenges overcome, we have very good professionals, and we have also achievements which we can easily showcase at a World Water Forum. We have done in many of these places that I am talking about, there has been success stories. There have been success stories which are not known to anybody.
Okay.
And there are also success stories which are sort of, I would say, blown out of proportion. So both these things are there. We need to be careful how we select. But a World Water Forum is a place where we can highlight the traditional wealth of knowledge which came to us through the ancient hydraulic civilization. But it can also highlight how we are manipulating and how we are using it to deal with the current situation, the current challenges which is coming to us. We are running short of water in some places. I believe I saw that we had to send water bowsers to Singharaja. If you read the newspapers, especially these tiny little pieces of information in the middle pages, you will find that there are so many places which are running short of water. There are so many issues that are coming because of pollution of water. This is a major problem for us.
Okay. There are so many mega development projects which take place in a short-sighted manner with no environmental impact assessment, feasibility study, that is believable, that takes place. Policy makers don't seem to care about the ill effects caused to the environment, to the community. How do we grapple with this cancer of greed and power and all of that?
I think that the only thing that we can do as social interlocutors, as academics, as water professionals, is to strengthen the communities which are affected.
Right.
To give them the power. Now, I always like to say that, women are the climate change foot soldiers.
Right.
We should make them into, if not generals, at least make them into sergeants. Give them the knowledge, give them that support. And communities which are supported can sometimes come up with their own solutions. I think a lot of the friction and these situations that we see sometimes in the media as well comes because there has not been proper awareness before the project. Before that, there has been no information flow to the community. Suddenly a community will wake up and find that some road is being cut through a catchment, maybe a tank is being, the bunt is being damaged. Only when it happens, they should know that, and they should be able to understand the implications and the impacts on their own livelihoods and their lives.
We are in conversation with Ms. Kusum Athukorala. We go in for a short commercial break. We'll be right back.
self image හැම කෙනාම තමන්ගේ වැඩේ හරියට කරා නම් අපි නැගිටිනවා.
බරපතල චෝදනාවක් තියෙනවා දුම්රිය දෙපාර්තමේන්තුවේ අතිකාල සඳහා විශාල මුදලක්.
පැහැදිලිවම ලංකාවේ අයිස් ප්‍රචලිත වුණා.
ඒ කඩන දෙන පත්තික ඒ පිගානට එන එක කඩින් හාල් කන කෙනාට තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ.
කව ආරම්භ වෙච්ච පොලිස් සංස්කෘතිය නෙමෙයි දැන් මේ වෙද්දි තියෙන්නේ. පුද්ගල පොලිසියට ආවට පස්සේ අපි යන්නේ ඕනද?
සංචාරකයන්ට විකුණන්නේ ඔවුන්ගේ සිහින.
චර දේවල් ලැබුණත් මදි.
මට පෞද්ගලිකව දෙනවා නම් තපල් දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව මම දන්නවා ලාභ හොයන්න හැටි.
A very good evening and welcome back to The Brief at 30 here on TV1.
The Brief at 30.
The Brief at 30 here on TV1.
Welcome back to The Brief at 30 on TV1.
News can be overwhelming, but we make it simple. Watch The Brief at 30 on TV1, Facebook Live and YouTube. Every weekday 9:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
To watch online, look for the Newsfirst.lk English page on Facebook and hit the like button, or search for @newsfirst.english on YouTube and subscribe to the Newsfirst English page. Don't forget to hit the notification bell.
The Brief at 30, your trusted Ollie news update.
Wait, The Brief at 30 next hour. Take care.
We need to ensure that the government is productive enough.
But institutions are not working. We are looking for a talisman. Now even the exports, we saw the numbers having grown.
The issue with local council elections is that it has become just part of the party political dynamics of this country.
Face the Nation, Wednesday nights at 9:30 on TV1.
Point of order.
එක කතන්දර කියනවා ඒක මට අදාළ නැහැ.
එතුමා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවට ඇවිල්ලා මට දැනෙනවා පාර්ලිමේන්තුව යටපත් කිරීම උත්සාහයක් තියෙනවා.
අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන ආදායම එක සැරේම ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ.
මොකද මේ වෙන්නේ? මම එකක් කියන්න කැමතියි. තමුන්නාන්සලා පාර්ලිමේන්තුව ඇතුලේ මේ ගේම් එක ගහන්න පුළුවන්. අපි මහ පාරට බහලා ජනතාව වෙනුවෙන් යුතුයකම ඉෂ්ට කරනවා.
ෆයිනල් කට් සතියේ දිනවල සවස 6:00ට.
Welcome back to the People's Platform. We're in conversation with Kusum Athukorala. She's the regional chair for the Global Water Partnership South Asia. It is important to have a multi-stakeholder, multi-sectoral approach when it comes to water security and climate change and the discourses surrounding it. Education plays a key role. Let's talk a bit about how the education system and the school curriculum needs to be constantly updated to incorporate all of this, and also the role of university students.
Yeah, I think I can't really comment on how the changes in the education, the school education system, because I'm not engaged in that. But I'd like to present two activities which are like ongoing now or recently concluded. One is that the Global Water Partnership had got a little bit of money to do something called a gender follow-up activity for South Asia. This is after quite some time. Gender is an issue I had been pushing for the 20 years that I have been engaged with GWP. So I was very pleased. So we could do an activity with a university in Sri Lanka. We called it the Citizen Science Program, an activity for climate advocacy. Basically, it meant that we supported the students of the University of Uavellassa, which means we had good support from the university, which I really appreciate, and we did a training which enabled them to go out as climate change advocates to a community-based organization.
Right.
So on the one hand, we are giving them a training. On the other hand, we are using them as catalysts to approach a community. Now, this is something that I feel that we should be doing because it builds both parties. It strengthens the community because they were also able to, share some of their problems, share some of their issues. But the university students also, we are giving them a role beyond what is usually traditionally used. The other one that I am happy to be engaged in is an activity which is going on with the University of Jaffna Department of Community Medicine, where we are doing an initial study and an activity on menstrual hygiene management. So I think that these are programs which are, for me, new programs which are being brought into the university system. So I think that if we can have opportunities for future students to engage with communities, it will be a two-way learning system for both groups.
It is so important to make sure that policymakers are also on the right side of history. Is there political will to ensure that we are ahead in the fields of water security, climate change adaptation?
Yes, Sonali, you sort of hit the nail on the head, and the nail starts in the year 2000 in the World Water Forum in The Hague. One of the most important statements of the Hague Forum was that we should involve political decision making. Accessing political decision makers was one thing that they really emphasized. And I have been seeing this come up and down in different ways. Where we have a political decision maker who is concerned, who is sensitized, who understands the importance of the issues that we are talking about, water security, sanitation for schools, we have made enormous strides. There was a time where the Ministry of Water Supply and Drainage, these ministries keep changing their names, I think that was the name that they had. They had a panel of stakeholders from all sectors, academia, private sector, the UN agencies, the ministries coming into what we used to call the WATSAN committee, Water and Sanitation Committee. Okay. This was very useful because, it gave us a platform to discuss certain issues. It gave us a platform to understand what other people are doing instead of working in silos. The silo problem is, I think, it's not only in the water sector, it is in many sectors, and then that leads to decision making which is very narrow-minded. We need to go from a wide-angle lens, a wide-angle vision and a wide-angle perspective. Now, the WATSAN committee, unfortunately, does seem to be in abeyance for some reason. I do hope that it will be brought up again and made effective, because in this current situation where we are having water-related issues, where we are having sanitation-related issues, where we have this crisis in the school systems, where we need to talk more about, girls going into school and having access to those sanitation. A WATSAN committee would be very useful. It's a good sounding board for what's happening.
Apart from and in addition to that, what other measures need to be urgently taken?
I think that we need to have some kind of targeted assistance to reach the people who are being left behind. If you look at that card, it is my, I always put out these cards with the theme. And in 2019, the theme was Leave No One Behind. Sonali, unfortunately, many children are being left behind now because of this current situation, the current poverty, simply not being able to go to school, or because you don't have a uniform, because you don't have money to buy the books. So, but from the water angle, it is, I think, our duty, my duty, to make sure that as much as possible they have access to water and sanitation. That can happen by linking these agencies, these schools, especially with people who are able to help. These blanket programs, I think, will not help. But if you can say X number of children, 100 children in the school don't have uniforms, and if you can get somebody who will donate those uniforms. Sri Lankans are very good in disasters. I think we saw it very well in the tsunami. And in a disaster, I think people are, this is a disaster. If children cannot go to school, it is a disaster for Sri Lanka. Let us try and see how we can link up these schools which need just that little bit of help to make sure that the children, especially the girls, stay in school.
My final question to you, how do we go about making people a partner in community development?
I think it starts with reaching out in different ways. You can be a university person, you can be a administrator, but it has to come from shedding your power, your policy, your politics, and reaching out to the other person. It's person-to-person contact which will help you do that bridging. And that bridging is being done by many people. I know there are people who are helping children, who are helping schools, but again, like I said, targeted assistance, because this is we are in for this for the long haul. This is not a crisis which is going to end in 1 year.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kusum Apukorala, Regional Chair, Global Water Partnership, South Asia. Thank you so much for coming here today and for sharing your perspectives and expertise.
Thank you, Sonali. And if I may leave you with the last words, again, it is in that picture. Never give up.
All right. Thanks so much. Thank you for watching us. We'll see you again next Monday with the single edition of the People's Platform. Have a safe weekend. Good night.